If you're an anime fan, then Bleach is a name you're probably familiar with. This creation of legendary mangaka Tite Kubo took the world by storm when it was first released, introducing audiences to a carefully crafted and fascinating world of Shinigamis and Soul Reapers who are tasked with protecting the souls of human beings from evil spirits called Hollows and guiding them into the afterlife. The story becomes more layered and complicated as the plot develops and more characters are added. The world of Bleach is home to some of the most interesting characters in anime, ranging from the deranged to the mysterious, all within a deep, lore-driven universe. With the recent resurgence of the series due to the release of the 1000 Years Blood War arc anime, it was only fitting that we discuss the most powerful being in the Bleach universe, the Soul King. As is the case with most well-crafted universes with profound lore, the creation myth is an important part. In Marvel Comics, it's the work of a being known as the One Above All, while in Tolkien's work, it is Eru Ilúvatar. In that same vein, the current world that Bleach is set in is the domain of the Soul King. We hope you're starting to understand that we're talking about a being that transcends his title of king and is more akin to a god. We hear about the Soul King, the ruler of the Soul Society, or the Seirete, from the very first arc of the anime and manga. He's spoken of with great reverence and respect as an almighty and powerful sovereign. The Reo, as he is also known, is protected by a group of elite Shinigami who form his royal guard called the Zero Squad. All we're told is that he resides in the Soul King's palace, which can only be accessed with the permission of his royal guard. He's mentioned thenceforth throughout the series, but we are never really granted an audience with him until the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. There's very little source material about the character of the Soul King, although he is touted as the creator of the world and an almighty being. We'll take what we know from the anime, manga, and light novels to give you a well-rounded insight into the character and anatomy of this mighty being and his place within the world of Bleach. If you haven't read the manga or seen the latest arc, this video might contain spoilers. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. The origins of the God King. To start with, it's not entirely clear which species the Soul King belonged to. Whether he was originally a human or a Shinigami is up for debate. We don't mention Quincy because his son, Yuhavach, is Quincy's progenitor. Therefore, they didn't exist before that. It is, however, understood that since Yuhavach is his son, he must have a connection to the Quincy at some level as well. In the primordial world, there was only a single plane of existence where spirits and other beings lived in relative harmony. It was a period where even the concepts of life and death didn't yet exist. There was a cycle to things where a being's reishi, the matter that composes the soul, circulated from one form to another. This was the natural order, and a balance existed, including the Hollow's existence. This balance would be severely disrupted when the Hollows would multiply and start preying on the humans, putting this cycle of existence into jeopardy as the natural order is threatened to come to a standstill. It was when the first Menos Grandes, the next level in a Hollow's evolution, began to appear that the Soul King would make his presence known. Nobody knew where he came from, his parents, family, or affiliation prior to this. It is speculated that he was born by the will of the universe, sensing the threat to itself and rejecting the unnatural order of things that the Hollows were leading it towards. For if the Hollows had their way, the cycle of existence would come to a halt, leading to the stagnation of the universe because only they would exist, having devoured everything. This debate about the stagnation of things is an important concept when it comes to Bleach and is further explored in the video later. Coming back to the origin story, there was a period where the Soul King would continue to destroy the Hollows and ensure that the cycle was maintained, which prevented the universe from coming to a halt. However, there were other powerful beings who wanted to change the status quo of things for their own reasons. These were the first ancestors of the 5 noble houses of the Shinigami, the Shiba, Kuchiki, Shihoin, Tsunayashiro, and an unknown 5th, each of whom had their own motivations which led them to believe that the universe as it wasn't the way to move forward. They wanted to divide the world into 3 different planes of existence, a place made for beings made of pure reishi, a physical world, and a realm that stood between the first 2, meant to house the Hollows. The combined might of these powerful and ancient 5 ancestors was still not enough to accomplish this feat. Hence, they decided to betray the Soul King and steal his powers by force to achieve their goal. This resulted in them dismembering and mutilating the Reo and sealing his torso within a crystal in order to weaken him enough to use his powers to create new worlds. They also scattered his remains across the newly formed planes of existence so that the Soul King would never fully recover his powers. Due to this, the Soul King appears the way he does when he finally makes his appearance towards the end of the 1000 Years Blood War arc. Powers and abilities. Omnipotent, omniscient, and Almighty. These are the words used to describe the powers of the Soul King chosen by Ichimonji Ichibei, the leader of the Zero Squad division and his royal guards. Having been supposedly created by the will of the universe itself, it wouldn't at all be a surprise that this is true. We aren't given an accurate gauge of the power of the Reo when he was whole, other than the fact that he could effortlessly reduce Hollows and Menos Grandes to dust of Reishi, which is an incredible feat. Even though he was weakened due to being mutilated and dismembered, his body parts were exponentially more powerful than some of the most powerful beings in Bleach. Their powers govern many of the universe's most fundamental aspects of existence. Now, considering their power levels, even when separated from their main body, one can only imagine how powerful the Soul King was when he was whole. Fortunately for us, the anime and the light novels cover the powers and abilities of various body parts of the Soul King, which have gained sentience, and others that are bonded with individuals. Through this, we can somewhat gather the scope of his abilities. Let's go through some of these abilities, both those we know of and those that can be derived from the powers of his body parts and organs. The Almighty. The first on the list of the Soul King's omnipotent powers is an ability called the Almighty, which is a true reflection of his godhood. The ability grants him omniscience and precognition, as he is aware of and can see every possible future and outcome. There is virtually nothing hidden from him, making him closest in meaning to the traditional understanding of a god. In the series, when Yuhavach threatens to siphon this ability from the Reo, we get to witness how invincible he becomes, as he's impervious to every threat that's directed towards him, having already seen his enemies' actions before they happen. One can only imagine when the actual owner wielded the power, how scary that must have made the Soul King. He supposedly knew about the plans of the 5 ancestors of Shinigami, but allowed himself to be captured and tortured without any resistance. Reo apparently did this since he had already foreseen the possible future of Bleach and understood this was the only way to set things into motion. This would mean that everybody, from the 5 ancestors to Yuhavach, was a pawn in the grand scheme of things that the Soul King had envisioned. Power of creation. The Reo's power was able to create 3 separate planes of existence by separating the primordial world. This was a true testament to his godlike powers. As we can see, he held the power of creation itself. Don't forget that he performed this incredible feat in his somewhat weakened form. One can only imagine what feats of power he'd be able to perform if he were tested. Through his power, a new order of existence was created, which resulted in the beginning of the concepts of life and death. Let that sink in. This being is responsible for birthing 3 different worlds, establishing a new order of existence, and creating the very concepts of life and death. His power levels are off the charts. If he wanted, we're sure he could have swatted the 5 ancestors without raising a finger. He's the linchpin that holds the Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the physical realm separated and stable. This goes to show the enormous power that he possesses to be able to not only create, but sustain his creation as a shell of his former self. Mimihage, the right hand of the Soul King. The right hand of the Soul King, called Mimihage, is worshipped by some in the Soul Society as a deity without the knowledge that it's the hand of the Reo. It governs the powers of stasis and stagnation. It can prevent the progression of anything it wills. For example, in the case of Ukitake, the captain of the 13th Division of the Gotei 13, Mimihage made it so that the captain's life was extended far beyond its intended years by stagnating his lung disease. As such, it can grant the person who wields its power immortality and eternal youth, as in it can stop aging and death. The use of Reo's right hand's powers is only limited by one's imagination. If it can stop death, there isn't much else that its powers can't affect. Mimihage is immune to the precognitive abilities of the Almighty, which is confirmed by Yuhavach when he is shocked to see the hand of the Soul King wrap itself around the 2 halves of the Soul King crystal to save Reo's life. Pernita Parnkias, the left hand of the Soul King. Next, we have the left hand of the Soul King, which is called Pernita Parnkias. It is the exact opposite of Mimihage and controls the realm of evolution and progress. Due to this ability, it can use the powers and attributes of the people it absorbs. Pernita can accelerate healing and regeneration by simply speeding up the factors responsible for these processes, which falls under its realm of progress and advancement. Just like the Mimihage, it is also invisible to the Almighty. It displays the ability to create clones of itself, all of which can use its abilities. Pernita can also manipulate both inorganic and organic things within the domain of its powers by shooting its nerves into the target. This power, which is called the Compulsory, is seen shredding the bodies of its victims, changing their size and shape, controlling their movement, creating fists from inorganic surroundings, and remotely controlling Pernita's severed parts. The left hand had gained such a level of self-awareness that it despised being referred to as the Soul King's body part and instead identified itself as a Quincy. Heart of the Soul King. We can also examine the Heart of the Soul King to get a better idea of his powers. The Heart of the Soul King is said to be manifested within the Sternritter, Gerard Valkyrie. His ability is called the Miracle, which should give you an idea of how broken it is. Gerard can basically shrug off any damage and come back stronger and more enhanced to counter the attacks that hurt him. He can perform literal miracles by surviving attacks that should kill him. We are informed by Gerard that the Miracle gives form to the desires and emotions of the masses. He is in fact so powerful and durable that he survives the Bankai of 3 captains, including the upgraded Bankai of Toshiro Hitsugaya in his adult form, Kenpachi Zaraki's new Bankai, and Byakuya's secret technique, Ika Senijinka, which can only activate in his Bankai's proper form called Senkei. If the powers of his arms weren't broken enough, the Soul King has the ability to literally overcome any disadvantage by performing a miracle, which, like the rest of his abilities, would be way more potent in his complete form. Gremithomos / the brain of the Soul King. This is essentially speculation, but this theory is backed by credible information and deduction. It is heavily implied in the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World that the Sternritter Gremithomos was the brain of the Soul King. Like the other body parts of the Soul King, Gremi also possesses an insanely overpowered ability. He can will anything he wishes to come into existence. In the anime, we are shown him hurtling a meteor at Zaraki Kenpachi simply by wishing it. For example, if he wishes to be more intelligent, his ability will make him smarter. If he wishes to be able to fly, he'll gain the ability to defy gravity. The only absolute limit to his power and what it can achieve is Gremi's own imagination and wishes. When he's finally defeated by his own wishes while working against himself in his battle against Zaraki Kenpachi, it is revealed to us that the Sternritter is actually a sentient brain, and Gremi is simply a form that the brain had wished into existence. Looking at the crazy abilities of the rest of the body parts and their ability to gain sentience, with 2 of them aligning themselves with the Quincy, it's not a far-fetched theory that the brain is actually Ryo's own. Other known fragments of the Soul King. In the novel Can't Fear Your Own World, some fragments of the Soul King are said to be embedded inside the Fullbringers, who are individuals with special powers whose mothers have all survived a hollow attack. This fragment attacks the hollows of the mothers carrying these individuals as it can sense the Soul King within them. Matsumoto Rangiku, who held a mere nail within her, and it was strong enough to power the extremely powerful artifact called the Hogyoku that was responsible for turning the traitorous captain Aizen Sosuke into a transcendental being. When we look at the terrible visage of the Soul King, as seen after his capture, there is still no accounting for his legs and other internal organs. If the power levels of his known body parts are at a god tier, one can only wonder what other powers the remaining missing body parts held. Even though these body parts, after gaining sentience, operate as their own beings, their powers and origins are still derived from the Soul King. As such, their powers are his powers. Spiritual weapon. The Soul King's weapon of choice is the mystical blade called Ameno Mi Hashira. It is the first known spiritual weapon and the precursor of Zanpakuto wielded by the Shinigamis. The Ameno Mi Hashira is a weapon that is said to have been created using the body and soul of the Ryo himself. If the powers and abilities of the Soul King are anything to go by, his weapon would be nothing to sneeze at. The blade was so feared by the ancestors of the 5 noble houses that it was not used by anybody after Ryo's imprisonment. The blade's fate is debated, as it was a closely guarded secret of the 5 clans, along with everything else regarding the Soul King. Some believe that, fearing the sword's power, it was reforged into 5 lesser swords, which serve as the family treasures of the 5 noble houses. Others believe the Shiba clan was initially given the duty of guarding the weapon. However, the other clans feared that the Shiba would wield the blade's power against them and free the Soul King. To appease them, the weapon was put under a seal that could only be opened with the 5 clans' combined Reiatsu, or spiritual energy. With the fall of the Shiba and a 5th unknown clan, one can safely assume Ameno Mi Hashira will never see the light of day again. Character analysis. For a being who spends the majority of his time behind the scenes and is, as we find out, in a state akin to suspended animation, the Soul King is a highly multifaceted character that serves to personify the various philosophies of the world of Bleach. He is the definitive tragic character, as he willingly subjects himself to the betrayal and violence enacted upon him despite seeing it coming in order to fulfill his vision of a better world. One of the most prominent themes of Bleach is the idea of stagnation and progress, with perfection perfection and utopia equated to stagnation, and the pursuit of betterment and imperfection equated to progress. In a perfect utopia, like the one that existed in the primordial world before the existence of the Seirete, Hueco Mundo, and the physical world, there would be no deaths and no ideals to strive towards because of a lack of motivating factors, as things would be preordained by the cycle of existence. The Reo, who initially fought the Menos to stop them from devouring the world and genuinely halting creation, seems to have realized that the cycle he fought to defend was in itself stagnation, as there could be no growth in a cycle of existence that went around in an eternal loop. It is because of this that he chooses to sacrifice himself to break the cycle. Bleach tries to tell us that it's not so much about achieving perfection as it is the various outcomes that result from a pursuit of it that truly matters. The Soul King, who is neither living nor dead, quite literally toes this line, as through his living consciousness he represents progress, but with his dead body he represents stagnancy. In the manga and anime, his offspring, Yuhavach, the King of Quincy, wishes to depose his father and cause a collapse of the three worlds, which would result in the world returning to its original state. The dichotomy of these two opposing philosophies is therefore intricately tied in extreme irony with the Shinigami, who betray the Reo, serving and protecting him, while his very own progeny, Yuhavach, and his followers who came from him want to kill him. For a character that doesn't speak a single word, his existence instead screams volumes about the intentions of the author and the world he wishes to create with this anime. Marvelous verdict! The majority of the Shinigamis of the Soul Society have never met their king. He acts as a symbol of power and stability, which the residents of Seirete revere. It's only natural, therefore, that they are not privy to the bloody history behind his betrayal at the hands of the noble families and the consequent events. He's a lonely guardian who is given quite literally everything to see the fulfillment of his vision. Even though he's trapped within his seal, he stands in a silent vigil, watching over all of Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the physical world. A veritable god chose to discard his divinity, trusting the future that would be created by the progeny of the very people who betrayed him. We've purposely left out his fate at the end of the show to not spoil things any more than we already have. It's such a shame that we don't get to see the Soul King at the height of his power. Let us hope Kubo will one day make a spin-off focusing on the primordial world of Bleach, where the Spirit King will play a prominent role. We hope this video helped you better understand the Soul King, the all-powerful God King of the Bleach universe. That's all we got for you this time, but stay safe out there and have a marvelous day.